You know, one of the coolest things about Helldivers 2 is that there is no meta. There is no one build, there is no one setup, one loadout, what have you, that is the best. Now, there's plenty of videos out there saying, hey, this is the one setup for all solo, or that will get you through, you know, the best group content or whatever. Yes, there are plenty out there. The thing is, you'll notice is that there's a lot of them, and they're not the same. And the reason for that, again, is because there's multiple loadouts, there's multiple ways of playing the game that are all viable, and most importantly, they're all fun. So today, what I want to show you is just a new and different way of playing, a new viable way of playing. And to be honest, it's fairly straightforward. So we're going to use the double-edged sickle that came out with the latest war bond, Servants of Freedom, and then we're going to pair that with any armor which has the inflammable trait on it, and then for our booster, we're going to choose Vitality. These three things combined make it where you can essentially have infinite ammo and incredibly fast reload times should you need or want to change out your heat sink, which from time to time you might want to do. You know, one of the reasons that this build works so well is, especially when you get to the higher difficulties, what you'll find is that total damage output becomes critically important. And what I mean by that is if you have something like the Orbital Precision Strike, which will kill any, you know, large unit in the game with one shot, typically, assuming it hits okay, that is really nice, but it has a several minute cooldown and it only kills one of those things. Well, if you're super hell diving, or maybe even running, you know, some level 8 difficulty stuff, you know, you're going to find that you have multiple units that are, you know, the largest in the game, and they're all coming for you. And a simple orbital strike, while incredibly convenient, very easy to use, and, you know, has a lot of utility, it just doesn't do enough damage. And so you find that, you know, things like that become less useful the higher you go in difficulty and tiers. And so really what ends up mattering a lot is full-on damage output. How much damage, how many bullets can you put downrange in a short period of time? And with the double-edged sickle, with the inflammable armor and the vitality booster, the answer is a lot. All right, so let's just go ahead and run through the pros. So unlimited ammo. That's right. You could just fire, fire, fire. By the time you know, in my experience with calling in stratagems, moving to a more defensible position, stuff like that, I really rarely need to change out my heat sink. Sometimes I do. The only real time you're going to have a problem is if you're on a hot planet, though. That's really it. Otherwise, you really do have unlimited ammo, and you can put a lot of damage, a lot of bullets, we'll call them bullets, downrange in a very short period of time, kill a lot of units. The other thing is the ultra-fast reload time. When you do need to switch out your heatsink, or if you are in a situation where you're getting dropped on, changing out your heatsink is faster than changing out a magazine on basically any build that I've noticed. It's incredibly quick, goes really fast, so that's also something that's really nice. And then the other thing is, again, that high total damage output is just really nice. It's really amazing. I'm going to pop up some footage so you guys can see it, but it works incredibly well. Now, there are some cons, there are some drawbacks to running a build like this, so let's go ahead and walk through it. Well, first up, you know, I kind of mentioned it. Hey, if you're on a hot planet, that heat sink is going to fill up faster, which means that you can fire less rounds, and then you're going to be swapping it out more often, and that might not be the best place for it. At the same time, it's still good. I've actually done it, but it's not nearly as good. And it's also, you know, the other side of that is if you're on a cold planet, this is going to be even better. It might even be a little bit OP, to be totally honest with you. The other thing is, you know, it's going to take up your armor slot and a booster slot. So you are losing some options to have this ability. Now, do I think that's the worst thing in the world? No, but it is a drawback, and it's something to keep in mind, right? The cool thing about the different loadouts is there's pros and cons to everything, and there's different play styles based on that. So you are going to need to pick a booster or make sure it's with somebody in the group. The booster is not required, but it is very helpful. And then the other thing is the armor. The armor is absolutely required. You can optionally go with like an acclimated armor, which gives you a 50% damage reduction from fire, but also electricity and gas. I've done it. I've tried it. It works out okay, but I don't really recommend it. At least for me, I would just rather have full-on fire armor because you do start taking damage when your heat sink kind of fills up. And with that, let's actually get into kind of the technical details here a little bit. Okay, so with the booster and with the armor, you can basically fire until your heat sink is completely full, at which point you will start to catch on fire. Now, if you lie prone, you can continue to fire and your health will just take hits each time you fire. Typically, I wouldn't recommend this unless you're just killing off the last couple of guys and you know you're going to be able to stem and you got plenty of stems available and what have you. Then sure, go for it. But generally speaking, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to stop and either change out your heat sink or just give it a second to cool down before you can continue firing. Now, if you're in the situation where you don't have the armor or the vitality booster, you're going to notice that very quickly, even when the heat sink is only about a third, maybe a fourth of the way full, that you're going to start taking damage. And then when it gets up pretty high, you're going to catch on fire. When it's at like 50 to 75%, you're going to catch on fire there. Now, depending on if you have the armor but not the booster, what you'll find is that you can actually get up to like 75% before you start really taking damage or too much damage. But it really is that's where it comes in, where you really want both. You can run without the vitality booster, and it can still be very effective. On a cold planet, that would probably be more viable. But the moral of the story is that really at some point you kind of want both of these for the maximum effect on this build, unless you're on a cold planet or something like that, which will help that heat sink stay lower. The other thing is, when you first start firing, you're not going to have the highest penetration, but as you continue to fire, it ramps up. It ramps up, honestly, incredibly quickly, basically at the point where you would start taking damage, which, again, would be lower, but with the armor, it's actually quite high. So, it's at that low point where you would, without the armor, without the vitality booster, it seems to be the point where you start getting that extra penetration or extra damage. That's at least what it feels like to me. I haven't, fully gone crazy in depth on exactly what it does. But I think it's pretty clear that it starts to ramp up in your penetration pretty early on in your firing. So much so that even on the bots, I didn't really have a problem. That's the other benefit of this build. You can run this on all three. You can run on bots, you can run on Illuminate, and it works great on bugs. There's really nothing where you can't run it on. The only thing you're going to find is that the highest tier unit, the most heavily armored units, it's not going to have any effect on them. I will note, you can shoot down bot airships with the double-edged sickle. You can actually shoot them down. I did it quite a few times. I was honestly quite surprised. It does take a lot of bullets, and maybe this is something you could do with a normal medium armor-piercing primary, but with a sickle, you don't have to worry about going through mags and mags of ammo. You just wait a little bit, let it cool down, and then you could fire again. So it's actually quite effective and pretty cool, to be totally honest with you. If you're looking for what to pair this with, you've already got the fire-resistant armor on, so Napalm Barrage is always great, works great, best on the Illuminate and the bugs, but it actually works okay against the bots as well, although I tend personally to run something a little bit different, like a 120 or something. If I want a wide area that, just does a lot of damage, the 120 or the 380 is what I personally prefer, because I also wanted to be able to take out those hulks. I also only super hell dive, so at lower levels the Napalm Barrage will be more effective because there'll be less of those top tier units like the the large hulks and the factory striders that won't really be affected by that at all. Other than that, if you want to stick with the old laser theme, you could go with something like the laser cannon. The laser cannon is pretty effective against the bots. Honestly, I found it to be quite nice. Again, you don't have to worry about running out of ammo, but we already have something that prevents us from really running out of ammo against lighter armored units, so there's kind of a bit of awkward overlap there that you don't really need. The other thing is, against a lot of the bugs, I find you need a lot of range. Now, often with the laser cannon, I'll pair it with a jetpack because I love my jetpack. And so you can jetpack away from an opponent and then turn around and zap them to get closer. You can jetpack away and can kind of continue that cat and mouse game, and it can be very effective. But it is a slower way to kill than if you went with something that had packed a bit more punch, like the recoilless. Other things you want to pair with this, really it depends on you. If you want to do incendiary mines, if you want to go all full fire, fire turret theme, you could. Really, everything else in this build is flexible, and it's up to you. Really, the only things you need are the armor and the vitality booster, and of course, the double-edged sickle. I also will tend to run incendiary mines with this. If you are going to run incendiary mines, I recommend the ones that have a fuse, not the impact. And the reason for that is because the incendiary mines with a fuse actually do twice the damage, at least twice the stated damage that the impact grenades do. And so, if you're being chased by a bunch of mobs, throw that grenade right at your feet, and by the time you get out of the area, it will explode and hit all the enemies behind you. But it also, you can cook it off, hold it for a second, and you can kind of learn to get used to it. Twice the damage is enough that I would strongly recommend learning how to use it. Again, the impact grenades are nice, so you could still go with the impact incendiary grenades. They're fun as well. It's fun to throw it out and see it instantly hit and blow up. But, it's here or there. It's whatever you personally prefer. So that's it, guys. That's the entire build. It's pretty straightforward. It's very effective, and I highly recommend it.